Look at the following images. Do they look familiar, nostalgic, calming, or even eerie? If so, you have just brushed back on one of the most significant internet phenomena, which will inevitably go on to define COVID in the 2020s. Liminal spaces. There really isn't one definition or even term for these kinds of images, but the internet has agreed on liminal spaces, so that's the term that I will use, despite anemoia and canopsia, or even just atmospheric places, in my opinion, being a lot better of a way to describe the feelings that these images invoke. But for the sake of the video, I will be using liminal space just due to name recognition alone. My first exposure to these kinds of images and this whole trend overall was during 2020, during peak lockdown season, when a video came up on my feed by the YouTube channel Solar Sands, simply titled Liminal Spaces, with its thumbnail being a bunch of recursive mono yellow walls. This was my first exposure to the trend, and 6 years later, with the Backrooms movie coming out, this trend has gotten back into the limelight again. I will always have a special spot in my heart for these kinds of image compilations that emerged during the peak liminal era. The Backrooms are a whole can of worms that would eventually go and overshadow the whole liminal space trend. However, in its early phases, the Backrooms were essentially a place that you would go to starve to death in and only get sent to at random by no-clipping, which is a video game term for going through an object or map. The reason I feel like people resonated so much with the Backrooms and liminal spaces at the time was because A, COVID, and B, everyone has been to a liminal space. Everyone knows that feeling. And what the Backrooms did was it essentially created a supernatural mythos for that feeling and these liminal spaces. Unfortunately, though, the Backrooms got so popular that it eventually overshadowed the liminal space trend, which it was symbiotically attached to. Not only did it overshadow the liminal space trend, it grew from it eventually became something like the SCP fandom. Not only have the Backrooms become essentially interdimensional SCP, which is something I think is both a good and bad thing, but another thing is it simplified the pure dreamlike aura of the liminal space sort of mythos, and it simplified that to like just a bunch of wiki pages meant to be understood by children. The reason I say that is because of the content rush triggered by a certain Backrooms found footage YouTube video by none other than Kane Pixels himself. I'm not going to give a play-by-play, because if you've watched this far into the video, you more likely than not have already seen it. For what it is an amazing horror short film. However, what it spawned couldn't be described in the same way. After this video was uploaded to the internet, YouTube was plagued by low quality video after low quality video of a camera moving around in some map on Blender. There were some good offshoot found footage films, however a vast majority of the Backrooms videos posted were complete slop. That doesn't even include all the kids videos that were released around that time. All of this content really just served to dumb down the Backrooms and unfortunately the concept of liminal spaces by proxy. Liminal spaces are now just what inspired the Backrooms, which is pedantically true, however not the full story. For the rest of this video, I will dedicate it to the various games and sub-aesthetics which I believe truly capture the liminal feeling. It's impossible to talk about this without first talking about Yume Nikki. Yume Nikki was developed by an anonymous developer who goes by Yume. Yume Nikki is a freeware game developed on RPG Maker. The earliest versions of this game were uploaded to the internet on June 26, 2004 and was developed until October 1st, 2007 when version 0.10 released. In the game, you play as Madatsuki, whose identity is mainly up to interpretation. The term Madatsuki translates directly into English as windowed, and that matches with the shirt Madatsuki wears. One thing important to note is that in the window on Madatsuki's shirt is a 2x3 gray and white checkerboard akin to a PNG's placeholder texture for what will eventually become transparent. I mostly interpret this as Kikiyama communicating to whoever's playing the game not to look too hard into the symbols of the game. I believe Madatsuki is meant to be the player more so than her own independent character, which will be important for the various interpretations of the game, which I will explain further. Most of the interpretations of Yume Nikki have to do with the various recurring motifs of the game, which I will list in the order they are listed in the fandom wiki, which I will link in the description. The first theme I will be talking about is the theme of isolation. In the game, in the real world, if you try to use the door, Madatsuki will shake her head and not leave the apartment. This has led to people interpreting Madatsuki as a hikikomori, which, if you don't already know, are essentially people who separate themselves from society to an extreme extent where they almost never leave the house. Another reason that people think this is because in the game, almost all NPCs ignore Madatsuki, which could mean she has experienced some form of neglect in her life. Final reason that people use for this hikikomori theory is that in the wilderness, which is one of the largest sections of the game, which can be accessed through the Dark World and the Nexus, you can come across a party. This party is attended by Tori Ninjin, which are found in other places of the game, and Madatsuki has no way to interact with the NPCs, which adds to this theme of isolation in the game. There's also a lot of bodily imagery in the game, which has caused a lot of people to speculate that maybe Madatsuki was a victim of some sort of SA. In Yume Nikki, there are multiple effects which change the way that Madatsuki looks and sometimes change how Madatsuki can interact with the world. One of these effects is the knife effect. If the player goes to the numbers world from the Nexus, the knife effect can be used on a specific tile which looks like a zipper and only has a 1 in 4 chance of spawning. Madatsuki can use the knife effect to stab it and create an opening. Once the player does this, they come face to face with a long, colorful, worm-shaped entity which is interpreted by most as phallic imagery, especially combined with the fact that said worm is rubbing the railing of the walkway. Also, when you get to the end of the hallway, you trigger an event which causes you to wake up immediately, which is one of the only times in the game which you are forced to wake up. It's pretty obvious why people think what they think about this particular part of the game, so I won't spell it out too much. A year ago, I was going through my first year of high school. I was watching one of those liminal space slideshows in order to recuperate after a long day at school. I was looking in the description and I saw the timestamps for the songs, and I noticed that almost all of them came from Yume Nikki. So I looked up the OST of Yume Nikki and instantly fell in love. So I looked up Yume Nikki on Steam and started playing. I love this game, I love liminal spaces, and I'll definitely make a full video on Yume Nikki in the future, but for the sake of keeping this video less than 30 minutes long, that is all the time I will give this game for now. Now that I've talked about Yume Nikki, I feel like I should finish off this video by talking about Dreamcore and Weirdcore. I grouped these two aesthetics together because they have a ton of overlap. If you're looking for a full breakdown of this aesthetic, I would recommend the Polygon Donut video, as that's really what opened my eyes to this aesthetic. I think that weirdcore as an aesthetic isn't meant to have a centralized meaning. The aesthetic is very surrealist in nature. I would actually describe the aesthetic as internet surrealism. While Dreamcore usually has more meaning behind it, and it usually has more poignant themes. Dreamcore and weirdcore images usually use a hazy, bright, and dreamlike atmosphere to invoke nostalgia and comfort in the viewer of said images. I feel like TikTok and other social media websites have commandeered this aesthetic and injected various motifs from the aesthetic like eyes, mushrooms, and characters which were not in the original images from 2020. Whilst Dreamcore is a branch of weirdcore from around 2020, weirdcore has been a thing since around 2015 and has gotten popular due to video essays and other videos explaining it. One of the cornerstones of weirdcore is low-quality liminal spaces as a base, which is often edited in surreal ways to create a weirdcore image. Common visual motifs in weirdcore images include nostalgic graphics, amateur edits, randomness, vagueness, ambiguity, and out-of-context imagery. All of these help create a dreamlike or even nightmarish effect on the viewer, which is what makes this aesthetic stand out and makes it special. Thank you for giving me time to explain to you my love for this semi-niche and very nostalgic trend. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell. I make a variety of videos, and if you like this video, you will more likely than not like some of the other content I've made, because I've made multiple videos in this exact format. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.